The dust cloud trailing behind the stagecoach obscured the setting sun as it rumbled into Sweetwater, Wyoming territory in the autumn of 1875. Rebecca Andrews clutched her belongings tighter as the wooden wheels hit a particularly deep rut, sending her petite frame bouncing against the hard seat. After 3 days of travel from Cheyenne, she was eager to disembark and begin her new life, however uncertain it might be. Last stop, Sweetwater, the driver called out as the horses slowed to a halt in front of the town's only hotel. Rebecca stepped down from the coach, her boots touching Wyoming soil for the first time. At 24, she had left everything behind in Boston: her family's disappointment, the scandal of a broken engagement, and the suffocating expectations that had threatened to extinguish her spirit. The teaching position advertised in the Sweetwater Gazette had been her salvation, her chance to forge her own path. The town stretched before her, a single dusty main street lined with wooden buildings, some boasting false fronts that reached toward the vast Wyoming sky. A general store, livery, saloon, and a small white church at the far end completed the picture of frontier life. It wasn't Boston, but perhaps that was its greatest virtue. Miss Andrews, a stern-faced woman, approached. "I'm Mrs. Holbrook, chairwoman of the school board. We expected you yesterday." Rebecca smoothed her travel-wrinkled dress. The stagecoach was delayed in Laramie. "I apologize for any inconvenience." Mrs. Holbrook gave a curt nod. "Your rooms are prepared above the schoolhouse. Classes begin Monday. There are 43 children enrolled, ages 5 to 16. She handed Rebecca a heavy iron key. "I trust you'll find everything satisfactory." Before Rebecca could respond, commotion erupted from the saloon across the street. A man burst through the batwing doors, stumbling into the street. He was followed by 2 others, their faces contorted with anger. "You cheatin' son of a—" One of the pursuers grabbed the first man's collar, spinning him around. "I won fair and square, Dawson," the man protested, breaking free of the grip. "Nobody wins 5 hands straight without marking the cards, Taylor." The accused man, Taylor, backed away, his hands raised. "I'm not looking for trouble. I've got my boy waiting at home." Rebecca noticed for the first time that the man had a weathered, handsome face beneath several days' growth of beard. His clothes were worn but clean, and despite the confrontation, he maintained a dignified bearing. Mrs. Holbrook clicked her tongue disapprovingly. "Beau Taylor and his gambling. That man needs to learn responsibility, especially with young Benjamin to raise alone." The situation across the street escalated as one of the angry men threw a punch that Taylor sidestepped with surprising agility. "Gentlemen," the authoritative voice belonged to a man wearing a silver star on his vest. "Take it elsewhere or spend the night in my jail." The men grumbled but dispersed. Taylor collected a small pouch from the ground, presumably his winnings, and hurried away down a side street. "Come along, Miss Andrews," Mrs. Holbrook said. "I'll show you to your accommodations. Best not to dwell on such unsavory elements. Mr. Taylor may be one of your students' fathers, but I advise keeping your distance. A widower with a gambling problem is precisely the sort of man a respectable young woman should avoid." Rebecca followed Mrs. Holbrook, but her eyes lingered on the direction Taylor had disappeared. There was something in his defense, "I've got my boy waiting at home," that spoke of a man with priorities beyond the gaming table, whatever Mrs. Holbrook might think. The schoolhouse stood at the eastern end of town, a modest single-story building with large windows and a small bell tower. Behind it, a staircase led to what would be Rebecca's new home: 2 rooms furnished simply but adequately with a bed, dresser, small table with 2 chairs, and a cast-iron stove. "The water pump is out back," Mrs. Holbrook explained. "Privy as well. Coal for the stove is delivered monthly. Your salary will be paid at the end of each month, $25, as agreed. Sunday services are mandatory. We expect our teacher to set an example." After Mrs. Holbrook departed, Rebecca sank onto her new bed, exhaustion from the journey washing over her. But despite her fatigue, anticipation bubbled within her chest. This was her fresh start, her opportunity to prove herself capable of independence. As twilight descended over Sweetwater, she unpacked her few belongings and arranged her books on a small shelf: volumes of poetry, history, mathematics, and her precious copy of Little Women. Tomorrow she would explore the town and prepare for Monday's classes. For now, She allowed herself to breathe in the unfamiliar air of freedom. Morning brought crisp autumn sunshine streaming through her window. After dressing in a simple blue dress and pinning her chestnut hair into a practical bun, Rebecca set out to familiarize herself with Sweetwater. The general store, run by a jovial man named Mr. Peterson, offered everything from dried goods to fabric, tools to candy. New schoolteacher, eh? Peterson smiled as he measured coffee beans. About time. The children have been running wild since Miss Winters left to marry that cattle baron from Montana. How many families are in Sweetwater? Rebecca asked, purchasing a small bag of peppermint drops. Town proper, about 30. Another 20 farmsteads and ranches scattered within 10 miles. He lowered his voice. Word of advice, Miss Andrews. These children aren't Boston children. They work alongside their parents before and after school. Some only attend when the farm work allows. Don't expect them to know their Shakespeare. Rebecca nodded thoughtfully. I appreciate the counsel, Mr. Peterson. I'll keep that in mind. As she left the store, a small commotion caught her attention. A boy of about 8 was struggling with a large burlap sack while trying to secure it to a weathered saddle on a patient bay horse. Need a hand there? She offered, approaching cautiously. The boy turned, revealing a freckled face beneath a mop of sandy hair. I can manage, madam, he insisted, though the sack was clearly too unwieldy for his small frame. I believe you can, Rebecca smiled. But my father always said accepting help doesn't mean you're not capable. The boy considered this, then nodded. All right then. Together, they secured the sack to the saddle. Up close, Rebecca noticed the boy's clothes were patched but clean, his boots well worn. I'm Miss Andrews, the new teacher, she introduced herself. Benjamin Taylor, madam. The boy extended a small hand which she shook formally. Everyone calls me Ben. Pleasure to meet you, Ben. Will I see you in school on Monday? Ben nodded enthusiastically. Yes, madam. Pa says education is more important than gold. Your father sounds like a wise man. He is, madam. Smartest man in the territory, I reckon. The pride in Ben's voice was unmistakable. Benjamin. The call came from down the street, and Rebecca recognized the man from yesterday's altercation. Beau Taylor approached, his expression shifting from concern to wariness upon seeing Rebecca. Pa, this is Miss Andrews. She's the new teacher, Ben announced excitedly. She helped me with the flour sack. Beau removed his hat, revealing thick, dark hair with the barest hints of silver at the temples. His blue eyes, striking against his sun-darkened skin, assessed Rebecca cautiously. Miss Andrews, he acknowledged with a slight nod. Appreciate your assistance. It was no trouble, Mr. Taylor. She tried to reconcile this polite man with the gambler from the previous day. An awkward silence fell before Beau cleared his throat. We should head back, Ben. Daylight's burning, and those fence posts won't set themselves. Yes, Pa. Ben mounted the horse with practiced ease. See you Monday, Miss Andrews. Beau hesitated, then said, Ben speaks highly of school, Miss Andrews. His mother taught him his letters before she passed. I've done my best since then, but... He trailed off, discomfort evident in his stance. I look forward to having him in class, Mr. Taylor. Beau nodded, then mounted behind his son. As they rode away, Rebecca found herself watching longer than propriety might dictate. There was something compelling about the widower and his son, a bond evident in the way they sat together on the horse, in the gentle way Beau's hand steadied Ben's shoulder. Mrs. Holbrook's warning echoed in her mind. A widower with a gambling problem is precisely the sort of man a respectable young woman should avoid. Rebecca shook off the thought. She was here to teach, not to involve herself in the personal affairs of the townspeople. Still, as she continued her exploration of Sweetwater, she found her thoughts returning to the Taylor men and the story that might lie behind their circumstances. Monday arrived with the nervous energy Rebecca always associated with first days. She rang the schoolhouse bell promptly at 8, watching as children filtered in from all directions, some from town homes, others riding in on horses or arriving in farm wagons. They ranged from tiny 5-year-olds with wide, curious eyes to teenagers who slouched in with affected indifference. Ben Taylor arrived on foot, his hair slicked down with water in a futile attempt to tame its natural cowlick. He carried a worn slate and a small satchel, his eager expression a teacher's dream. Good morning, Miss Andrews, he greeted cheerfully, taking a seat near the front. By 8:15, the schoolroom was filled with the murmuring of 40 children. Rebecca called for attention, and the room gradually quieted. "Good morning," she began. "I'm Miss Andrews, and I'm honored to be your new teacher. I believe learning should be both challenging and enjoyable. I expect your best effort, and in return, I promise to give you mine." The morning progressed smoothly as Rebecca assessed her students' varying levels of knowledge. The younger children worked on their letters while the older ones tackled arithmetic and grammar. Ben proved to be bright and attentive, quick with answers and eager to help struggling classmates. At noon, the children spilled outside for lunch and play. Rebecca was arranging books when a soft knock at the door drew her attention. Beau Taylor stood in the doorway, hat in hand. "Miss Andrews, I hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all, Mr. Taylor. The children are at lunch." He stepped inside, visibly uncomfortable in the schoolroom setting. "I wanted to thank you properly for helping Ben on Saturday, and to apologize for the circumstances of our first encounter." Rebecca felt heat rise to her cheeks. "There's no need, Mr. Taylor." "There is." He twisted his hat brim between calloused fingers. "Sweetwater's a small town. You'll hear things about me. Some true, some exaggerated. I just want you to know that whatever else I am, I'm trying to raise my boy right." The sincerity in his voice touched something in Rebecca. "Ben is a credit to you. He's bright, polite, and eager to learn." Pride softened Beau's features. "That's good to hear." His mother, Catherine, she would have been pleased. "May I ask how long she's been gone?" "For years now. Fever took her winter of 71. He glanced out the window where Ben was engaged in a game of tag. "He was just 4. Sometimes I wonder if he remembers her at all." "Children remember more than we think," Rebecca offered gently, "especially the feeling of being loved." Beau's eyes, when they returned to hers, held a depth of emotion that made her breath catch. "You're kind to say so, Miss Andrews." The moment stretched between them until he broke it with a small cough. "I should let you get back to your preparations." "Good day, Miss Andrews." "Good day, Mr. Taylor." As he left, Rebecca found herself unusually flustered. She'd encountered handsome men before. Boston had no shortage of eligible bachelors, but there was something about Beau Taylor's unvarnished honesty, the love for his son evident in every word, that affected her more deeply than flowery compliments or practiced charm ever had. The first week of school established a routine that suited Rebecca well. Mornings were devoted to fundamentals reading, writing, and arithmetic, while afternoons allowed for history, geography, and natural sciences. On Fridays, she introduced her students to poetry and art, much to the delight of most and the eye-rolling of a few older boys. Ben Taylor continued to shine, his natural intelligence matched by genuine curiosity. Occasionally, Rebecca would glance up to find Beau Taylor observing class through the window, his expression thoughtful as he watched his son participate. He never disturbed the lessons, always disappearing before dismissal. It was during the second week that Rebecca learned more about the Taylors' circumstances. She had stayed late to prepare the next day's lessons when Mrs. Peterson, the storekeeper's wife, arrived with a basket of apples for the new teacher. "Such a blessing to have educated young women willing to come west," Mrs. Peterson chatted. "Though I imagine it's quite different from Boston society." "Refreshingly so," Rebecca smiled, arranging the apples on her desk. "I noticed young Benjamin Taylor seems to have taken to you," Mrs. Peterson continued, her tone casual, but her eyes sharp with the curiosity that fueled small-town gossip. "He's a bright student." "Indeed. A miracle, considering their circumstances." Mrs. Peterson settled onto a student bench, clearly preparing to share information. "Beau Taylor wasn't always as you see him now. He and Catherine came here in '67, just after the war. He had prospects, then bought a small ranch outside town, worked hard. They were happy when little Benjamin came along." Rebecca knew she should discourage such talk, but curiosity won out. "What changed?" "Catherine's death broke something in him. He started drinking, gambling, lost most of the ranch to creditors. They live in a small cabin on what's left of the property, now barely 10 acres. He does odd jobs, some carpentry, breaks horses for the rocking age when they need it. And yes, he gambles." Mrs. Peterson sighed. "The thing is, Miss Andrews, before Catherine died, he was respected. Even now, for all his faults, he's never failed to put that boy first." Rebecca absorbed this information silently. I only tell you this, Mrs. Peterson continued, because Benjamin needs advocates. And because Beau Taylor, despite everything, is a good man who's lost his way. After Mrs. Peterson left, Rebecca sat contemplating their conversation. The story explained much about both father and son Ben's maturity beyond his years, Beau's protective fierceness, the pride with which they carried themselves despite their reduced circumstances. The following Saturday, Rebecca was returning from the mercantile when she spotted Ben sitting alone on a bench outside the barber shop, his expression glum. "Hello, Ben," she greeted. "Why the long face on such a fine day?" "Pa's inside getting a proper shave and haircut," he explained. "Says he can't look like a mountain man for the harvest dance tonight." "That sounds like a special occasion." Ben nodded. Mrs. Miller at the rocking H asked Pa to play fiddle for the dance. "He's real good, Miss Andrews." "But," he hesitated. "But what?" "I'm supposed to stay with old Mrs. Watkins while he's playing, and she smells like cabbage and tells the same story about her cat over and over." Rebecca chuckled at his frank assessment. "Perhaps it won't be so bad. I guess." Ben kicked at the dirt. "Pa says we need the money, so he has to play. He always says we don't have much, but we get by." The door to the barber shop opened, and Beau emerged looking transformed. His beard was trimmed to a neat shadow along his jaw, his hair cut and combed. Without the concealing scruff, his features were more defined: a strong jaw, high cheekbones, and a small scar above his right eyebrow. "Miss Andrews," he greeted, clearly surprised to find her chatting with his son. "Mr. Taylor. Ben was just telling me about the harvest dance tonight." "Ah, yes." He cleared his throat. "The Rocking H hosts it every year to celebrate the end of Roundup. They've asked me to provide some music. Pa plays the best fiddle in 3 counties, Ben declared proudly. "Is that so?" Rebecca smiled. "I look forward to hearing you play then. I'll be attending with the Petersons." Something flickered in Beau's eyes, pleasure perhaps, quickly tempered. "It's just simple dance tunes. Nothing fancy like you might be used to back east. Good music is good music, Mr. Taylor, regardless of where it's played." The harvest dance was held in the Rocking H's vast barn, cleared of hay and livestock for the occasion. Lanterns hung from the rafters, casting a warm glow over the proceedings. Nearly everyone from Sweetwater and the surrounding ranches had come, dressed in their Sunday best. Rebecca arrived with the Petersons, wearing her second-best dress, a deep green that complemented her hazel eyes. Mrs. Peterson made immediate introductions to those Rebecca hadn't yet met, including Harvey Miller, owner of the Rocking H, and his wife Dorothea. "We're delighted you've come to Sweetwater, Miss Andrews," Mrs. Miller said warmly. "Our Lucy speaks highly of your classes, especially the poetry readings." The musicians were setting up on a small platform at one end of the barn. Rebecca spotted Beau tuning a well-loved fiddle, his concentration complete as he drew the bow experimentally across the strings. He wore a clean white shirt and dark vest, his boots polished to a shine. With his newly trimmed hair and beard, he looked like a different man from the one she'd first encountered outside the saloon. The music began, lively and infectious. 3 men played, one on fiddle, one on guitar, and another on a small accordion. Beau's talent was immediately apparent. His fiddle sang with emotion that belied the simple dance tunes, his body swaying slightly with the rhythm as his fingers danced across the strings. Couples filled the floor, from awkward teenagers to gray-haired couples who had clearly been dancing together for decades. Rebecca found herself tapping her foot, enjoying the spirited atmosphere. During a break in the music, she wandered outside for some fresh air. The autumn night was crisp, stars brilliant in the Wyoming sky. She heard footsteps behind her and turned to find Beau approaching, fiddle still in hand. "Enjoying the festivities, Miss Andrews?" he asked, stopping a respectful distance away. "Very much. You play beautifully." He ducked his head at the compliment. "Music's always come natural to me. My pa played, and his before him. It's a wonderful gift to pass down." They stood in companionable silence for a moment, gazing at the stars. "Different from what you'd see in Boston," Beau observed. "The stars? They're the same stars, Mr. Taylor. They just seem closer here, without the city smoke to dim them." He considered this. "I've never been further east than St. Louis." "What made you leave Boston for Sweetwater, if you don't mind my asking?" Rebecca thought carefully before answering. "I wanted something real. In Boston, everything felt prescribed. The right schools, the right friends, the right husband. She glanced at him. I was engaged, briefly, to a banker my parents approved of, but I realized I was agreeing to a life others had designed for me. So you came to Wyoming Territory. Quite a change. The best kind. She smiled. What about you, Mr. Taylor? Have you always lived in Wyoming? Born in Missouri. Fought for the Union in '63, though I was barely 18. Afterward, I couldn't stomach going back home, too many memories. Headed west instead, worked cattle drives until I met Catherine in Denver. She was a schoolteacher too. His voice softened at the memory. We came here to build something of our own. And you have, Rebecca said gently. Ben is a remarkable boy. Pride and sadness mingled in Beau's expression. He's the best of both of us. Smart like his mother. Stubborn like me. The music inside struck up again. I should get back, Beau said reluctantly. Still earning my pay. Of course. Thank you for the conversation, Mr. Taylor. As he turned to go, he hesitated. Rebecca, Miss Andrews, would you honor me with a dance later? When my fiddle duties are done. The request sent an unexpected flutter through her chest. I'd like that. He nodded once, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth, before heading back inside. The remainder of the evening passed in a blur of music and laughter. True to his word, after the official dancing concluded, Beau sought Rebecca out. The other musicians continued playing, a slower, gentler tune now. May I have this dance? He asked formally, extending his hand. Rebecca placed her fingers in his, noting the calluses that spoke of hard work. He led her to the floor with surprising grace, one hand resting lightly at her waist, the other holding hers. I should warn you, she said as they began to move. I was never the most accomplished dancer at Boston's socials. You're doing fine, he assured her, guiding her through a simple waltz step. Just follow the music. There was an ease to dancing with Beau that Rebecca hadn't expected. He led confidently but gently, his movements intuitive rather than rigidly formal. As they circled the floor, she became aware of curious glances from other townspeople, particularly Mrs. Holbrook, whose disapproving frown was visible even from across the barn. We're causing a stir, Rebecca murmured. Beau's eyes flickered to Mrs. Holbrook, then back to Rebecca. Does that trouble you? She considered the question seriously. It shouldn't matter who I dance with. But it does. I'm not blind to how things are, Miss Andrews. You're the town's new schoolteacher, a position that comes with expectations. He trailed off. A talented musician, a dedicated father, and an excellent dance partner, she finished for him. Something raw and vulnerable flashed in his eyes before he masked it with a small smile. You're too kind. I'm truthful, Mr. Taylor. I've never placed much value in town gossip. The music drew to a close, and they stepped apart. Beau bowed slightly, the formal gesture at odds with the intensity in his gaze. Thank you for the dance, Miss Andrews. Rebecca, she said impulsively. When we're not in school, I'd like it if you called me Rebecca. Rebecca, he repeated, as though testing the feel of her name. Then I'm Beau, not Mr. Taylor. They parted ways soon after, Rebecca returning to the Petersons for the ride back to town. As their wagon pulled away from the rocking H, she glanced back to see Beau standing in the lantern light. Watching her departure, his fiddle cradled in his arms like an old friend. The following weeks brought an unexpected rhythm to Rebecca's life in Sweetwater. School days were filled with the rewards and challenges of teaching, while her free time increasingly included encounters with the Taylors. Sometimes it was just Ben, stopping by the schoolhouse with a question about his studies. Other times, she would run into Beau in town, their conversations growing longer and more comfortable with each meeting. October faded into November, bringing colder weather and the first dusting of snow. Rebecca added extra coal to her stove and wore woolen stockings beneath her skirts. The children arrived at school with red cheeks and steaming breath, sledding down the hill behind the schoolhouse during lunch breaks. One Saturday afternoon, Rebecca was grading arithmetic papers when a knock at her door revealed Ben, bundled against the cold, his nose pink from the chill. Miss Andrews, Pa sent me to ask if you'd like to come to dinner tomorrow after church, he announced. He's making venison stew. He's a good cook, he added earnestly. Better than Mrs. Peterson, though don't tell her I said so. Rebecca smiled at the boy's candor. That sounds lovely, Ben. I'd be delighted to accept. Great. His face lit up. Pa said to tell you not to worry about the ride. He'll bring the wagon to church. After Ben departed, Rebecca found herself contemplating her wardrobe with unexpected concern. The invitation was merely neighborly, she told herself, yet she spent considerable time choosing her Sunday dress, a deep blue wool that brought out the copper highlights in her hair. Church service the next day was typical for Sweetwater. Reverend Collins delivered a sermon on charity that managed to be both inspiring and practical. Rebecca sat with the Petersons as usual, but her attention wandered several times to Beau and Ben, seated toward the back of the small church. Afterward, as the congregation dispersed, Rebecca approached the Taylor's wagon. Beau helped her up to the seat, his hand steady as she gathered her skirts. "Thank you for accepting our invitation," he said as they set off. "Ben's been talking about it all week." "I'm looking forward to it," she replied honestly. "Though I must admit, I'm curious to see the Taylor homestead." The journey took them about 2 miles outside of town, along a winding trail that followed a small creek. Finally, they crested a gentle rise, revealing a modest cabin nestled against a backdrop of pine trees. A small barn stood nearby, along with a corral containing 2 horses. Smoke curled invitingly from the cabin's chimney. "It's not much," Beau said, a note of apology in his voice. "But it's home." The cabin's interior was simple but welcoming. A large stone fireplace dominated one wall, with a cooking pot already bubbling over the flames. A table with 4 chairs stood in the center, while a curtained alcove presumably hid the sleeping area. Books lined a crude shelf beside the fireplace, more than Rebecca would have expected. "Pa reads every night," Ben explained, following her gaze. "He's teaching me Shakespeare. Listen, the quality of mercy is not strained. It droppeth as the gentle rain from heaven upon the place beneath." "Impressive," Rebecca smiled. "The Merchant of Venice." "My Catherine loved the bard," Beau explained, stirring the stew. She brought her books west, insisted they were as essential as flour and salt. "She sounds like a remarkable woman." She was. He gestured to a small framed daguerreotype on the mantel. "That's her, with Ben just after his first birthday." The image showed a pretty woman with kind eyes holding a chubby-cheeked baby. Her resemblance to Ben was striking. "She's in your smile," Rebecca told Ben gently. Dinner was indeed delicious venison stew rich with root vegetables and herbs, accompanied by crusty bread that Beau admitted sheepishly he'd traded a repaired plow for at the widow Johnson's farm. "She bakes. I'm handy with tools. Works out for both of us," he explained. The conversation flowed easily, ranging from school matters to local news to books they'd read. Beau revealed a depth of knowledge that surprised Rebecca. He'd educated himself through reading, supplementing a rudimentary formal education. As dusk approached, Beau suggested a short walk to settle the meal, as he put it. Ben elected to stay behind with a book of adventure stories, giving Rebecca a significant look that suggested the boy might be playing matchmaker. Outside, the evening was clear and cold, the first stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. They walked toward the creek that bordered the property, their breath forming clouds in the chilly air. "Thank you for today," Rebecca said. "It's been wonderful." "We don't entertain much," Beau admitted. "But Ben's taken a shine to you." "As have I," he added quietly. The simple statement hung in the air between them, honest and unembellished. "I've grown fond of you both as well," she replied, her heart quickening. They stopped by the creek, its surface reflecting the emerging stars. Beau turned to face her, his expression serious in the fading light. "Rebecca, I should be plain. I'm not a wealthy man. What you see is what I have: 10 acres, a cabin that needs work every spring, and prospects that depend on my hands staying strong enough to work. It's not the life you left Boston for, I'm sure." "You're wrong," she said gently. "In Boston, I was surrounded by men whose wealth couldn't disguise their emptiness. The man I was to marry saw me as an ornament, not a partner." She met his gaze steadily. "I came west seeking something genuine. I found that here in Sweetwater, with my students, and with you and Ben." Something shifted in Beau's expression, hope tempered with caution. Slowly, giving her every opportunity to step away, he leaned forward and brushed his lips against hers. The kiss was gentle, questioning. Rebecca answered by stepping closer, her hand rising to rest against his cheek as the kiss deepened. His arms encircled her waist, solid and secure. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Beau pressed his forehead against hers. "I never expected this," he murmured. After Catherine, I thought that part of my life was over. Life has a way of surprising you, she replied softly. I certainly never imagined finding someone like you in Wyoming territory. The crunch of approaching footsteps made them step apart. Ben appeared, bundled in his coat, his expression hopeful. Pa? Miss Andrews? Is everything all right? Beau exchanged a glance with Rebecca, his eyes asking a silent question. She nodded slightly. Everything's fine, son, Beau said, placing a hand on Ben's shoulder. In fact, I think things might be better than they've been in a long while. The boy's face split into a wide grin. Does this mean Miss Andrews will come visit more often? Rebecca laughed, touched by his transparency. I'd like that very much, Ben. If you and your father agree. We agree, Ben stated decisively. Don't we, Pa? We certainly do. Beau's smile held a warmth that made Rebecca's heart swell. As December arrived, bringing with it preparations for Christmas, Rebecca found herself dividing her time between school duties and visits to the Taylor homestead. The relationship between her and Beau deepened with each meeting, built on conversations by the fire, shared meals, and Ben's enthusiastic inclusion in their growing bond. Town gossip inevitably flourished. Mrs. Holbrook made her disapproval clear with pointed remarks about the propriety of a schoolteachers' associations, while others like the Petersons offered quiet support. Rebecca found that the opinions of others mattered less than she might have once feared. The joy she found with Beau and Ben far outweighed any social discomfort. One frigid Saturday afternoon, Rebecca and Ben were baking gingerbread in the cabin while Beau repaired harnesses in the barn. The domestic scene felt natural, as if they had been a family for years rather than mere months. Miss Andrews, Ben began, carefully cutting dough into star shapes. Do you miss Boston? Rebecca considered the question. I miss certain things, the libraries, the bookshops, occasionally the theaters. But no, I don't miss Boston itself. That's good. Ben concentrated on his task for a moment before continuing. Because Pa and I would miss you something terrible if you went back. The simple declaration touched her deeply. I have no plans to leave, Ben. Promise. His eyes, so like his father's, searched hers earnestly. I promise. She squeezed his flour-dusted hand. Sweetwater is my home now. Ben nodded, satisfied. Pa's happier since you came. He laughs more. And he hasn't gone to the saloon to play cards in weeks. The observation surprised her. Beau had never directly discussed his gambling with her, though she'd noticed he seemed more settled lately. Your father loves you very much, Ben. He wants to be the best man he can be for you. And for you, Ben added matter-of-factly. He told me so. Before Rebecca could respond, the cabin door opened, admitting Beau and a blast of cold air. He stamped snow from his boots, his cheeks ruddy from the cold. It's really coming down out there, he announced, hanging his coat on a peg. We might have ourselves a proper blizzard by nightfall. Rebecca moved to the window, concerned. The snow was indeed falling heavily, the landscape already transformed into a white expanse. Perhaps I should head back to town before it worsens. Beau joined her at the window, his expression worried. I don't think that's wise. The trail will be treacherous already, and visibility's dropping by the minute. But I can't possibly, she stopped, aware of the impropriety of staying overnight. You can take Pa's bed, Ben suggested practically. Pa and I can sleep by the fire. We've done it before when the roof leaked over our beds last spring. Beau and Rebecca exchanged a look, both aware of the potential for gossip should she remain. Ben's right about the sleeping arrangements, Beau said quietly. And I'd rather face wagging tongues than risk your safety on the trail tonight. The decision was effectively made for them as the storm intensified throughout the afternoon. By evening, the wind howled around the cabin, driving snow against the windows in white sheets. Beau built up the fire, creating a cozy sanctuary against the elements. After a simple supper, Ben settled on the hearth rug with a book, while Beau brought out his fiddle. As the storm raged outside, he played softly haunting mountain ballads, lively jigs, and finally, a sweet, yearning melody Rebecca hadn't heard before. It's beautiful, she said when he finished. I don't recognize it. It's mine, he admitted, a hint of self-consciousness in his voice. I've been working on it these past weeks. It's called Rebecca's Waltz. The gesture left her momentarily speechless. You composed a piece for me? Music says things sometimes that words can't quite manage. His eyes held hers across the firelit room. conveying emotions deeper than the melody itself. Ben, observing the exchange with approval, yawned dramatically. I'm awful tired. Pa think I'll turn in. His transparent attempt to give them privacy made both adults smile. After Ben had changed behind the curtain and settled onto his pallet near the fire, Beau stepped outside briefly to check the animals, returning with snow dusting his shoulders. Storm's showing no sign of letting up, he reported, keeping his voice low. How are you holding up? Surprisingly well, Rebecca answered honestly. This isn't exactly how I imagined spending my evening, but there's nowhere I'd rather be stranded. They sat together on the small sofa, the firelight casting dancing shadows across the cabin walls. In the quiet intimacy of the moment, Rebecca found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her to this point, from the stifling certainties of Boston society to the wild unpredictability of Wyoming territory. Penny for your thoughts? Beau asked, his voice gentle in the stillness. I was thinking about choices, she replied. 6 months ago, I was engaged to a man I didn't love, preparing for a life that would have slowly extinguished everything I value about myself. Now I'm snowbound in a cabin with a fiddle-playing widower and his son, happier than I've ever been. Life takes strange turns, he agreed, his hand finding hers in the shadows. When Catherine died, I thought happiness was behind me. I focused on Ben, on survival. Didn't allow myself to want more. He paused, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. Until you stepped off that stagecoach. The confession hung in the air between them, honest and vulnerable. Rebecca turned to face him fully, her free hand rising to touch his cheek. Beau, she whispered, I think I'm falling in love with you. His eyes, reflecting the firelight, searched hers. Think. Or no. No, she amended, her voice stronger. I love you. And Ben, the life you've built here. Its simplicity. Its authenticity. Beau drew a shaky breath. Rebecca, I need you to understand something. I can't offer you the comforts you're accustomed to. We don't have much, she pressed her fingers gently against his lips, stopping his words. You have everything I need. He kissed her then, a kiss full of promise and tenderness. When they parted, his expression was one of wonder and resolve. I love you, he said, the words plainly spoken but carrying the weight of absolute certainty. I think I have since that first dance at the Harvest Festival. They talked long into the night, sharing whispered confidences and future dreams while the blizzard raged and Ben slept peacefully by the fire. Finally, propriety insisted they part, Beau to his makeshift bed near his son, Rebecca to the curtained alcove where Catherine's handmade quilt provided both warmth and a sense of blessing from the woman who had loved these two males before her. Morning brought brilliant sunshine, reflecting off pristine snow. The storm had left nearly 2 feet of fresh powder blanketing the landscape, transforming the modest homestead into a glistening wonderland. After a breakfast of flapjacks prepared by Beau, they bundled up to assess the situation outside. Ben immediately fell to making snow angels, while Beau checked on the livestock. Rebecca stood on the porch, breathing in the crisp, clean air, feeling strangely at peace despite the impromptu overnight stay that was surely causing speculation in town. Beau joined her, his expression thoughtful. Trail to town won't be passable until tomorrow at the earliest. Then it seems you're stuck with me for another day, she smiled. He took her hand, his expression growing serious. Rebecca, last night changed something for me. Hearing you say you love us, seeing you here in our home. It feels right in a way nothing has since Catherine. It feels right to me too, she assured him. Then perhaps, he hesitated, gathering his courage. Perhaps we should consider making this arrangement permanent. Rebecca's breath caught. Beau Taylor, are you proposing marriage? Inelegantly, but yes. A smile tugged at his lips. I know it's sudden. I know there will be talk. But I love you, Rebecca Andrews, and I want to build a life with you, me, you, and Ben. A family. Joy bubbled up within her chest, unexpected and overwhelming. Yes, she said simply. Yes, I will marry you. His face transformed with happiness as he swept her into an embrace that lifted her feet from the porch. Their laughter brought Ben running, his expression curious. What's happening? He demanded. Beau set Rebecca down, keeping one arm around her waist. Miss Andrews has agreed to marry me, son. How would you feel about her becoming your new mother? Ben's eyes widened. Then his face split into a grin of pure delight. Really? You'll stay with us forever. Forever, Rebecca confirmed, opening her arms to the boy who rushed into her embrace. The three of them stood together on the snow-covered porch, a new family forged in the unexpected crucible of a Wyoming winter. News of their engagement spread quickly through Sweetwater when they finally returned to town. Reactions were mixed. Some, like the Petersons, offered genuine congratulations, while others, particularly Mrs. Holbrook, expressed concern about the propriety of a schoolteacher marrying a man of Beau's reputation. The school board will need to discuss your continued employment, Miss Andrews, Mrs. Holbrook informed her stiffly. There are concerns about your judgment. Rebecca faced the opposition with quiet dignity. I understand your concerns, Mrs. Holbrook, but I assure you my commitment to the children's education remains unchanged. As for my personal life, I've chosen to marry a good, honorable man who loves his son and works hard to provide for him. I fail to see how that reflects poorly on my judgment. In the end, practicality won out over prejudice. Qualified teachers were scarce in the territory, and Rebecca had proven herself capable and dedicated. The school board voted to retain her services, with only Mrs. Holbrook dissenting. Winter deepened, but preparations for a spring wedding continued. Rebecca maintained her rooms above the schoolhouse while helping Beau and Ben make improvements to the cabin, a new shelf here, curtains there, plans for an addition to provide more space for their blended family. February brought a surprise visitor to Sweetwater, Rebecca's younger sister, Caroline, who arrived on the afternoon stagecoach with trunks and an expression of determination. You didn't really think I'd miss your wedding, did you? Caroline embraced Rebecca warmly, though mother and father send their regrets. Or rather, their disapproval thinly disguised as regrets. You came all this way alone. Rebecca marveled, helping her sister with her luggage. I'm 22, Becca, perfectly capable of traveling across the country to see my sister marry her frontier hero. Caroline's eyes sparkled with mischief. Now, where is this Beau Taylor who's stolen my sensible sister's heart? The meeting between Caroline and the Taylors took place that evening at the schoolhouse. Beau arrived with Ben in tow, clearly nervous about meeting a member of Rebecca's family, but determined to make a good impression. Caroline, to Rebecca's relief, was warm and direct. So you're the man who's made my sister happier than I've ever seen her, she declared after introductions were made. I approve already. Even without knowing anything about me? Beau asked, surprised. I know what matters, Caroline replied simply. I've read every letter Rebecca has sent since she arrived here. I know she loves you and Ben. I know you treat her with respect and kindness. The rest is just details. As March arrived, bringing the first hints of spring, wedding preparations accelerated. The ceremony would be small, held in the White Church with Reverend Collins officiating, followed by a celebration at the Rocking H, generously offered by the Millers. 2 days before the wedding, Beau arrived at the schoolhouse after classes, his expression troubled. What's wrong? Rebecca asked, immediately concerned. He handed her a letter. This came today. The letter, bearing an Omaha postmark, was from a law firm representing Catherine's uncle, a man named James Harrington. It stated that Mr. Harrington, having recently learned of his niece's death, wished to establish a relationship with his great-nephew Benjamin and was prepared to offer the boy advantages and education befitting a Harrington heir. Catherine mentioned her uncle once or twice. Beau explained, his voice tight. Wealthy man, railroad investments. They weren't close. He disapproved of her marrying a former soldier with no prospects. Never even answered the letter she sent announcing Ben's birth. Rebecca read the letter again, noting its formal tone and underlying presumption. What do you want to do? Tell him to go to hell, Beau said bluntly, then sighed. But that wouldn't be fair to Ben. This man is his blood relation, and he could offer Ben things I can't, proper schooling, opportunities one can only dream of giving him. Is that what you want? To send Ben to Omaha? God, no. The vehemence in his voice was unmistakable. He's my son, my life, but I need to consider what's best for him, not just what I want. Rebecca took his hands in hers. Then we'll figure this out together, as a family. That evening, they sat Ben down and carefully explained the situation. The boy listened intently, his young face serious beyond his years. So this man, my great-uncle, wants me to come live with him? Ben clarified. He wants to meet you, Beau hedged. To be part of your life. but I'd have to leave you. And Miss Andrews. Ben's perception cut straight to the heart of the matter. I'd have to leave Sweetwater. It would be your decision, son, Beau assured him, though Rebecca could see the strain it cost him to say the words. Your uncle could give you advantages I can't, the finest schools, travel, a life of comfort. Ben was quiet for a long moment, considering. Then he looked up, his expression resolute. I don't want to go. Ben, you should think about this carefully, Beau began. I have thought about it, Pa. The boy interrupted with unusual firmness. I don't need fancy schools or travel. I need you and Miss Andrews in our home. You always say we don't have much, but we have each other. That's everything. The simple wisdom in the child's words brought tears to Rebecca's eyes. Beau pulled his son into a fierce embrace, his own eyes suspiciously bright. You're sure, son? He asked, his voice rough with emotion. I'm sure, Pa. Ben looked between them, his expression earnest. Can I write to my great-uncle, though? Tell him thank you, but no thank you? Maybe he could visit us instead. That sounds like an excellent solution, Rebecca smiled, amazed once again by the boy's maturity and compassion. The letter was drafted that evening, a polite but firm decline of the offer, with an invitation for Mr. Harrington to visit Sweetwater should he wish to know his great-nephew. Whether the wealthy railroad investor would deign to visit their humble homestead remained to be seen, but the decision had been made, reinforcing the bonds of their unconventional family. The wedding day dawned clear and mild, a perfect early spring day with wildflowers beginning to dip the prairie. The small church was filled to capacity with townspeople and ranchers from the surrounding area, curiosity bringing out even those who had initially disapproved of the match. Rebecca wore a simple cream-colored dress that Caroline had helped her make, with violets from Mrs. Peterson's garden woven into her hair. Beau and Ben waited at the altar, both in new suits purchased with the proceeds from Beau's winter carpentry work, their expressions a matching blend of nervousness and joy. As Rebecca walked down the aisle on Mr. Peterson's arm, her eyes met Beau's, and the rest of the world seemed to fade away. This moment, this man and boy waiting for her represented everything she had ever truly wanted. Love based on respect and shared values. Family built on choice rather than obligation. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt. When Reverend Collins pronounced them husband and wife, Beau kissed her with a tenderness that promised a lifetime of devotion. Ben, standing proudly beside them, was included in their first embrace as a legal family, a gesture that brought approving murmurs from the congregation. The celebration at the rocking age afterward was joyous. With music, Beau persuaded to play his fiddle for one special dance with his new wife, abundant food, and even Mrs. Holbrook unbending enough to offer stiff congratulations. As evening approached, the newlyweds and Ben prepared to depart for their home. Caroline, who would remain in Sweetwater for another week before returning east, hugged her sister tightly. I always thought you were making a terrible mistake leaving Boston, she confessed. I've never been happier to be wrong. You found your place, Rebecca Taylor. The name, her new name, sent a thrill through Rebecca. I have, she agreed, glancing at Beau and Ben waiting patiently with the wagon. My very own place in this wild, wonderful West. The ride home was filled with comfortable conversation and plans for the future. Ben, exhausted from the day's excitement, fell asleep against Rebecca's side, his trust and acceptance the most precious wedding gift she could have received. As they approached the homestead, Beau slowed the horses, turning to her with an expression of sudden vulnerability. Are you sure, Rebecca? This life, it's not what you were raised for. The work is hard, the comforts few. I wouldn't blame you if sometimes you miss the life you left behind. She looked at the cabin, their cabin silhouetted against the sunset. It was modest, yes. The roof would need patching come summer. The garden was still just turned earth waiting for seeds. But it was theirs, a home built on love and perseverance. Beau Taylor, she said softly, mindful of the sleeping boy between them. I want you to listen carefully. I will never regret choosing this life, choosing you and Ben. Every day I spend here teaches me what truly matters. And it isn't fine china or theater tickets or fashionable addresses. What is it then? He asked, a smile beginning to form. Family. Purpose. Building something meaningful together. She touched his cheek gently. You once told me we don't have much. But you were wrong. We have everything that matters. He kissed her then, a kiss that held promise and passion and gratitude. Ben stirred between them, blinking sleepily. "Are we home?" he mumbled. "Yes, son," Beau answered, his eyes still on Rebecca. "We're home." Epilogue 5 years later, the afternoon sun slanted through the windows of the expanded Taylor cabin, illuminating the scene within. Rebecca sat at the table, helping Ben with his algebra, while keeping an eye on 3-year-old Catherine, who was industriously building a tower of wooden blocks on the hearth rug. From outside came the sound of Beau's axe rhythmically splitting firewood. Life had changed dramatically in the 5 years since their wedding. The original cabin had been expanded to include 2 proper bedrooms and a small study where Rebecca conducted lessons for children too distant from town to attend the schoolhouse regularly. The acreage had increased as well. Beau had gradually purchased adjoining land until their property now encompassed 40 productive acres with a small but growing herd of cattle. Ben, now 13, had shot up in height and was showing promising talent as both a scholar and a horseman. He still planned to attend college someday, a dream supported wholeheartedly by his parents, who set aside a portion of their modest income each month toward that goal. Little Catherine Elizabeth Taylor, named for both her grandmothers, had arrived 2 years after the wedding, bringing a whirlwind of energy and laughter to the household. She had her father's blue eyes and her mother's determined spirit, a combination that both delighted and occasionally exhausted her parents. The sound of an approaching wagon drew Rebecca to the window. "Ben, would you check who that is? We're not expecting visitors." Ben moved to the door, then turned with a grin. "It's Uncle James." Rebecca smiled at the title. James Harrington, initially skeptical of his great-nephew's decision to remain in Wyoming, had indeed visited Sweetwater. To everyone's surprise, the railroad magnate had formed a genuine bond with Ben and, by extension, with the entire Taylor family. His quarterly visits had become a highlight of their year, bringing books, news from the East, and a grudging respect for the life his niece's widower had built. "Catherine," Rebecca called, "Granduncle James is here. Let's tidy your blocks." The little girl clapped with delight. "Uncle James brings presents." "Catherine," Rebecca admonished gently, "we don't love Uncle James for his presents." "I know," the child responded seriously. "We love him 'cause he's family." Beau entered from outside, wiping his brow. "I heard a wagon. James is early this visit." "Perhaps he has news," Rebecca suggested, straightening her apron. Their last letter from Caroline had mentioned that James was considering extending his railroad interests into Wyoming territory. The family gathered on the porch to greet their visitor, who descended from his rented wagon with the spryness of a man 20 years younger than his actual 65. "Well, don't you make a pretty picture?" James observed, his Eastern accent still pronounced despite his frequent Western travels. "The Taylor family of Sweetwater, Wyoming, the best investment I never intended to make." The reference to his initial attempt to claim Ben had become a family joke over the years, the painful memory transformed by time and mutual respect. Ben stepped forward to take the older man's traveling bag. "How was your journey, Uncle James?" "Dusty, as always," James replied, clapping the boy on the shoulder. "But worth every mile." He scooped up little Catherine, who had been dancing impatiently at his feet. "And how's my favorite great-grandniece?" "I'm your only great-grandniece," Catherine pointed out logically, a trait she'd inherited from her mother. "All the more reason you're my favorite," James countered, producing a small package from his pocket that made the child squeal with anticipation. Inside the cabin, over coffee and Rebecca's fresh-baked bread, James revealed the purpose of his earlier-than-expected visit. "The railroad is indeed coming to Sweetwater," he announced. "Construction begins in the spring. It will change everything for this region: more settlers, better access to markets for cattle and crops, prosperity for those positioned to take advantage." Beau nodded thoughtfully. "We've been hearing rumors for months. Some of the old-timers are worried about what it means for the way of life here. Change is inevitable," James said. "The question is whether one adapts or gets left behind." He reached into his coat, withdrawing a document. "Which brings me to the other reason for my visit. I'd like to offer you a business proposition, Beau." The document outlined a partnership. James would provide capital to expand the Taylor Ranch substantially, with Beau managing the operation. The focus would be on breeding quality stock to sell to new settlers arriving on the railroad. "I'm not looking for charity, James," Beau said carefully, studying the proposal. Charity. James scoffed. I'm a businessman, Taylor. I don't make charitable investments. You have something I need: knowledge of this land, expertise with livestock, a reputation for honesty among the locals. I have something you need: capital to expand at a pace that will position you ahead of the coming boom. Rebecca, reading over her husband's shoulder, saw the potential immediately. It's a fair offer, Beau. We'd retain majority ownership, with James as a silent partner. Ben, listening intently to the adult conversation, added, it would mean I could help manage the ranch and still go to college, Pa. Maybe study veterinary medicine like we've talked about. Beau looked around at his family, at the life they'd built together through hard work and determination. From struggling widower to respected rancher, his journey had been one of redemption and growth. Much of that he owed to the woman beside him, who had seen beyond his circumstances to the man he could become. Well, Mrs. Taylor, he asked, taking Rebecca's hand, are you ready for another adventure? She squeezed his fingers, remembering the uncertain young woman who had stepped off the stagecoach 5 years earlier, seeking authenticity and purpose. She had found both, along with a love deeper than she had known was possible. I believe I am, Mr. Taylor, she answered with a smile. We've faced bigger challenges together. James raised his coffee cup in a toast. To the Taylor Ranch, then. May it prosper as richly as this family has. Later that evening, after James had retired to the guest room and the children were asleep, Beau and Rebecca sat on the porch swing, watching the stars emerge in the vast Wyoming sky. The same stars she had once observed were closer here, without Boston City smoke to dim them. Did you ever imagine this? Beau asked quietly, his arm around her shoulders. That first day in Sweetwater, when you saw me stumbling out of the saloon after a card game? Rebecca laughed softly, leaning into his embrace. Certainly not. Though I do recall thinking you had kind eyes, even when you were being accused of cheating. I wasn't cheating, he reminded her. Just lucky. The luckiest day of my life was when that stagecoach brought me to Sweetwater, she said, her voice growing serious. To you and Ben. And now look at us, he marveled. A growing ranch, 2 beautiful children, even James Harrington as a business partner. Not bad for a man who once had nothing but a run-down cabin and a stubborn streak. You never had nothing, Beau Taylor, Rebecca corrected gently. You had integrity, determination, love for your son, the courage to keep going when it would have been easier to give up. She turned in his arms to face him, the moonlight silvering his features. You had everything that mattered. He kissed her then, with the same tenderness he had shown on their wedding day, but deepened by 5 years of shared joys and challenges, of building a life together on the Wyoming frontier. I love you, Rebecca Taylor, he whispered against her lips. And I love you, she replied. Today, tomorrow, and for all the days that follow. Above them, the stars shone brilliant and clear, witnesses to a love that had defied convention and circumstance, a love born in the Wild West, where a single father with little to his name had given a Boston schoolteacher everything her heart truly needed.